This series is about my sixth Ford Ranger. I've owned 6 of them over the years, and they were all the same. Long box, V6, fleet. The fleet Rangers never had all the bells and whistles. It was just a truck. That was all I wanted. My first Ranger was a 1984. Then I got an 87. Then an 89. Then a 93, and finally a 2007. This is an image of my 2007 Ford Ranger one day before it was sold with 194,000 miles. And here it is setting next to the new Ranger, the 2022. It was special ordered as a super cab, 6-foot 1-inch box, vinyl floor, cloth seats, mud flaps, and the rear seat delete. This modification to my 6th Ford Ranger was without a doubt the hardest one of all the mods that I've done to the truck. It took 4.5 hours to get this horn installed. Part of it was running the wires. I watched the YouTube videos. I couldn't do what they did. There is no way, without completely gutting the front of the truck, to get the horn in front of the radiator. It was a miserable job, but it sounds great. So this is how I installed my Lamphus Police 100-watt air horn. Now, watching the YouTube videos, the reviews of this horn, they said if you connect it to the battery, the power supply is running all the time, and if you don't drive the truck a lot, it runs the battery dead. So I had to have a switched fuse. So there's all kinds of fuses in the fuse panel right by the battery. None of them are switched, and if there was one switched, it has to be at least 15 to 20 amps. So it had to be inside, and under the steering column on that fuse panel, number 37 down at the bottom, that one was switched. So that's the one that I chose because I'm no longer going to have a horn that works all the time. It's only when the switch is on, which is fine. So to get to that number 37 fuse, you have to drop the panel, which is not a big thing. That comes down. And then to get it out of the way, you pull the 2 plastic screws like I'm showing here, and that'll drop out of there. With that out, then you have a chance to get in under to run your power wire to that fuse. So with the switch on, I got power off the number 37. Switch off, no power. That's what I want. Damn honking thing. And I've got a tap right there using the 10 amp or 20 amp fuse that was there. And then I've just got to take that and run that to the front. Now there was a guy on the internet that showed how to get a wire from the inner panel to the outside through that rubber boot where the main electrical panel wiring loom is. He just used a wire snake like you'd use for wiring a house to push straight through the rubber. Well, I tried it, I couldn't do it. So I took an awl and punched a hole through both sides, starting from the inside, as you see. Then I thought I would take that awl and tape my wire to it and push it through. Well, that didn't work. So what I ended up doing was I got a piece of 12 gauge Romex, and I used the bare ground copper wire. Pushed it through. It came through. I reached down in back of the brake reservoir and got a hold of it and pulled it out, as you see. Then I bent it over and bent my wire around it and then taped it up so that it would not pull out. And then finally, I just pulled it straight through that rubber boot. But given the time of trying to figure out how to do it, watching people that did it on the internet, trying to copy them, and I couldn't do it. It burned up at least a couple hours. So with the wire through, now I had to reach up right behind the bumper and undo the bracket that holds those two horns. And that was quite a miserable thing because I did not have a lift. So I'm laying on my back and I'm unscrewing that thing. And so I got it out, and there's the horns. And then I pulled the connector off one of the horns and took the wire. There was a positive and a negative. All I needed was the signal wire. And then I went ahead and used a squeeze connector to extend that wire, and I put a little black silicone to make sure that that connector was waterproof. You can see that the one wire is cut off because all I want is the signal wire. And I used silicone again to cover up the contacts where it plugged into the horn. Then all I had to do was crawl back under the truck, reach up in and plug that subassembly into the truck so that now when I hit the horn button, the signal would be diverted to my horn. Now, like I said earlier, I would have preferred to have that horn down in front of the radiator. However, there's an air shroud around it that you can't go from the top, and you can't go from the bottom, you can't go from the sides. So I took the horn, and it's going to reside directly behind the driver's side headlights and just ahead of the battery. So I set it down in that little area, and I created a couple little brackets so that I could mount that to the frame of the truck because there happened to be two threaded holes, and I just had two unequal length mounts, and I just used 6mm bolts and bolted it to the frame, and as you can see, it sets in nicely in that little tiny area between the battery on the right and the headlights on the left. And then it was ready for the sound check. And with the sound check complete, it was now 4.5 hours in, and I'd had all I wanted, but I had my police horn, so the first miscreant that pulls out in front of me, they're going to know they did something wrong.